California is looking to do away with civil rights legislation. So, voters in California, this is from the San Francisco Chronicle. San Francisco voters will be asked to repeal Prop 209 ban on affirmative action. Now, this is what's going to be interesting, is they're going to frame it all under affirmative action, as if this is something that is going to be good for civil rights, good for minorities. It is not. So let's go ahead and we'll read this article, and I'll give my commentary as we go. Again, before we get going, like, share, comment, subscribe. Go ahead and check out, these are just my hip shot videos. I'm just responding from the hip to different news articles, different things going on in the world today. For the full show, revved up, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I just put out a new episode, the second part of my Black Lives Matter series, where we dissect all of the lies behind the Black Lives Matter movement. But let's go ahead and get into this right here. So, from Sacramento, California voters will be asked whether to reverse the state's prohibition on affirmative action, allowing public universities to consider race and admissions in government to give preference to businesses owned by women and people of color when awarding contracts. The state Senate voted Wednesday to place a proposed The state Senate voted Wednesday to place a proposed constitutional amendment on the November ballot to reverse Proposition 209, which voters approved in 1996. The initiative's proponents said making the state colorblind was a question of fairness, and honestly, being colorblind is fairness. But we're going to see the direction that our country is going in. They are going to start viewing everything by race. Intersectionality, we can see it's going on steroids, and there could be some very seriously negative consequences to this. So let's go ahead and take a little bit more of a look at this. The initiative's proponents said making the state colorblind was a question of fairness. Repeal advocates argue that it has limited diversity at University of California campuses and cost businesses owned by women and people of color billions of dollars. I'm not sure how you can say that it's cost them billions of dollars because they weren't awarded contracts that they didn't earn. That is, you got to look every side. Every coin has two sides. So if you flip that coin over, and now all of a sudden you have companies that maybe aren't as competitive with their bids, which is going to cost taxpayers billions, but it's also going to cost other companies billions that are now losing out on jobs that they might be more well qualified or well suited to handle, just because of the color of their skin or the gender of the owner. It's not this is racism and sexism put into law. It's the repeal of the Civil Rights Act in California. It's insane. If approved by voters, the amendment would strip language from the state constitution that prohibits public universities, schools, and government agencies from using race or sex in their admissions criteria, hiring, and contract decisions. Senators voted 30-10 to approve the constitutional amendment ACA 5. That was comfortably over the required two-thirds total. The measure passed largely along partisan lines, with only one Republican, Senator Scott Wilk of Santa Clarita. All my people in Santa Clarita, you got to get rid of this guy. In support, and no Democrats opposed. The measure, which the Assembly approved earlier this month, does not require Governor Gavin Newsom's signature. Voters can approve it in November in a simple majority. The vote followed an emotional floor debate that lasted more than 2 hours, during several Black, Asian American, and Latino senators described their experiences with racism. The bedrock of who we are in this country is based on race. No. That is not the bedrock of who we are. See, this is the cultural Marxism that I was talking about in the Revved Up video that I just released. Everything being viewed by your intersectional group, how you're able to fit neatly into a box just based on, unattributable characteristics. You can't change your race. You can't change your gender. Or, I guess you can change your gender, apparently. You can't change your sex. That's for damn sure. You're born with what you have. You should be hired on the merits of what you put forth. And these ideas that the bedrock of who we are in this country is based on race. That's one of the saddest statements I've ever heard. We spent hundreds of years evolving as a country to not be based on race. If this is their mindset now, if this was the mindset, and it's kind of comparable to the mindset that we had starting out as a nation. I wouldn't say it was. It really isn't, though. Because even when we started out as a nation, we started out under the idea that that all people are created equal under the eyes of God. The problem was, at the time, that idea was just so far ahead of the marketplace, it really couldn't be implemented to the degree with which it was intended to, the spirit of the law. It wasn't able to be implemented to the spirit of the idea. But now it looks like we're reverting back to, antebellum ideas on race, in which, the bedrock of who we are is based on race. That's depressing to hear that people are thinking this way, and that this sort of mentality is what is driving our culture, it's driving our institutions, and it is now rooted in our government. And this is a very dark direction we're headed in. So he's the vice chair of California Legislative Black Caucus. He added, "It's time to end the racism that exists in California and the racism that exists in this building." For one, you can't just say it's time to end racism. Racism is always going to exist as long as there are people and assholes, and there will always be assholes as long as you have people. Which, let's see 20 years down the line, they're just going to say, let's exterminate the human race and just give the whole planet back to the trees. It's back to the wilderness. It's very dark direction we're headed. It's time to understand that race and gender are a factor. No, they are not. They are not a factor. Race and gender, and if they are, they should not be. Race and gender were a factor in the slave days. They shouldn't be in a free society. In a free society, it should all be based on merit. Who cares what color your skin is? Who cares what your sex is? If you're good for the job, you're good for the job, and you should get the job. There's nothing wrong with looking at it. So that's what he's saying. It's time to understand that race and gender are a factor. There's nothing wrong with looking at it. Actually, yes, everything is wrong with looking at it. This is not progressive. This is regressive. This is getting back into a time machine and going back into the heyday of racism. The only problem is now it's going to be, in the early days of America, of course, it was all just racism from whites on others. Now there's just going to be racism from all directions. It's going to be a racism free-for-all under this sort of intersectional guideline that they're trying to implement. Racist free-for-all. That's what we're headed towards. Proposition 209 was the culmination of decades of controversy over affirmative action policies in California, led by then-Governor Pete Wilson. Proponents hailed the law as marking a new era of equal opportunity where Californians would only be judged by their merit. It was one of the great things about California, and now they're just about to do away with it. There are a few great things about California. You got the natural beauty, and now that's about it. Progressive lawmakers say, these are not progressives, these are regressives. They're trying to go back in time to the days where everybody was judged by race, by their immutable characteristics. Immutable traits. There's nothing even character about it. So I can't even say characteristic. That's a misnomer. Progressive lawmakers say that it has undermined the efforts to diversify colleges, campuses, police departments, school workforces, and the recipients of government contracts. Now, this is interesting. They're saying that it's undermined the diversity efforts, which are often pushed by people on the left, who runs college campuses and school workforces. It ain't Republicans. It ain't Republicans. So what's funny is that they're inadvertently calling out the left's own racism and then doubling down with another racist policy. The Democrats were always the party of racism. From their inception all the way until tomorrow. They are the party of racism. They always have been. And they just project their racism onto other people. So that people like you and me, well, maybe you, I don't know who's watching this. We believe that we believe in equality. We believe that everybody should be judged based on the content of their character. It's Martin Luther King. We believe in that. This is abolishing that. Opposition to ACA 5 has been led by several primarily Chinese American groups because they have a little bit of an understanding of what it means to come from a communist country run by Marxists, which is implemented by cultural Marxists, which is all this is. It's cultural Marxism. which worry it would lead to quotas on Asian American students at elite UC campuses. And it would. And it would. There's already been lawsuits against Harvard for discriminating, putting quotas on Asian students. And, they can't even specify what kind of Asian they're talking about. I mean, Asian could be anything from Japanese to Middle Eastern when you come to look at it. I mean, you look in Britain, they can't even call people Middle Eastern. They have to call them Asian just to try to scrub the whole idea of terrorism away from it. So they call it, any Asian could be anything. So now all of a sudden, you're from India and you can't get in because you're quote unquote Asian because they don't like how many Koreans they have in their program or something. You see, these racist policies will affect everybody negatively. It's not going to play out the way that they want it to. It's not going to give some uplifting boost to these people that they think are so oppressed. First of all, you're in America, so you're not oppressed. If you go out, you work hard, you can get it. You can get a job. You can get you start a business. You can get contracts if you do it well. Nobody awards contracts based on race. They award contracts based on who can do the job at the best cost. That's business. The only color that matters is green. And yeah, like I said, we've already been seeing Harvard, I believe, has a bunch of lawsuits on them because they have already implemented. They didn't have these quote unquote anti-affirmative action, and this could go the other way too because that's another thing that people don't realize. You could get maybe you have an area of California that does have a bunch of white supremacists in it. Now, I think that's a stretch because there's only about a handful of white supremacists left in this nation, even though to the mainstream media and to the left, it's some big boogeyman where 60% of the nation, anybody who looks at and votes for Trump or supports Trump is a white supremacist. Nonsense. But just say hypothetically speaking, you got this area of Northern California that's, and run by a bunch of white supremacists. This doesn't mean that you have to have affirmative action. It just means that you now can discriminate based on race, gender, anything like that. So this could backfire and end up hurting minorities even more. Law of unintended consequences. That's what the left never understands. Law of unintended consequences. Senator Lin Ling, Republican, Diamond Bar, Los Angeles County, echoed those sentiments Wednesday, arguing the bill could legalize race-based quotas, and it could. She urged legislators to look for other ways to increase university admissions for and contracting for people of color. Yeah, it's called hire them. Just hire them. It's the people on the left that run these institutions. You want diversity? Hire diverse people. Just do it. You're the ones that are in charge of this shit. It's not Republicans. Jesus Christ, if Republicans were in charge, this wouldn't even be a question. Although if run by Republicans, nothing would ever get done either. Let's work together over the next year on how we can accomplish our goals without using discrimination as the main tool to fight discrimination. Yeah, exactly. Using discrimination to fight discrimination. Good, well said, Chang. The measure is supported by a diverse coalition of groups. The Asian and Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus endorsed ACA 5 on Monday after initially not taking a position. That probably just means they were pressured and ended up bending the knee. Senator Richard Pan, Sacramento, described the caucus sentiment saying, opposition to affirmative action is not colorblind. It's blindness towards structural racism. People make my head hurt. These people make my head hurt. We understand that by the time you get to the college application process, structural racism ensures that people are not at the same starting point. Oh, that's a gold mine of a quote right there. You know what else? You know what else structurally assures that people will not be at the same starting point? This affirmative action bill. All of a sudden you're going to have quotas. You're going to have likely going to be a majority white people that end up facing this discrimination. But they're going to be like, oh, you got your white privilege. You're just going to go get rich elsewhere. These people live in a fantasy. They live in a fantasy where they think white people just pop out the womb and it's just all gold trickling from the sky. We just pop out of the womb and we wrap our umbilical cords around pots of gold and just throw them over our shoulder and take them home with us. What the fuck is wrong with these people? Equally talented people are not at the same place. Well, first of all, talent is subjective, so it's not just about talent, it's also about can you get it done on budget. There's a lot of things that go into this. I'm done with this. California, you just continue to fall off into the ocean. And I live in California, so to see this. So, that's it. We are losing our civil rights in California. We are now going to be able to discriminate based on gender and race. And next, it's going to be horse and buggies in the streets, which I'm sure they would actually like. I'm talking about going back in time, but I'm sure they would actually like that because it's just going to mean less carbon emissions. We just have to clean up all the horse shit. All right, that's it for this one. Bullshit.